Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson, and back from an international trip, Michael Bruntz, who discovered that in Norway they are huge fans of the 2019 Nebraska-Colorado game that probably isn't as popular here in Lincoln, Nebraska, as it must have been in Bergen. Is that where you saw this one, Bruntz?
Yeah, the Bergen Airport. Adrian Martinez is on the wall there at a random sports bar, like a catch-all sports bar. I walked by and kind of out of the corner of my eye saw Adrian had like a kind of very distinct running style. Like he, and I was like, that looks like Adrian Martinez to me. And I walked over there, and sure enough, on this wall of this random airport sports bar in Norway is Adrian Martinez scoring a touchdown against Colorado in 2019, which kind of prompted was that the high water mark of Scott Frost's tenure at Nebraska? Was the first half at Colorado?
The 17-0 lead against 17-0 lead against Colorado?
Yeah, like never in his tenure did you feel good the way that you did going into the locker room against Colorado.
I wonder.
That was like the yeah.
I wonder if the 2020 win against Penn State would maybe be, because it's a huge win. It's supposed to be a big year. Obviously, COVID's going on, so that might have put a damper on some of it. There's part of me that wonders if maybe that, but you could certainly make a case that the falling action, if you will, of the tragic hero Scott Frost story, which we will absolutely be covering in depth on this podcast because that's what people want, started the second half against Colorado in 2019. You could make that case. I'd listen to that case.
Yeah, I think you can make a strong case for that. I mean, maybe even the Maurice Washington run, which I believe was their catch, that was in the second half, right? From what I recall.
Yeah, it was after Colorado made a little push at him, and then Maurice had the burst that put him back up 10. You're like, all is well.
Yeah.
And then they gave up a 99-yard touchdown on a flea flicker.
Yeah.
Or maybe that happened before. I don't know. But
Steven Montez.
Yeah.
Do you think that should the city of Bergen bring Adrian Martinez in and just honor him for being on the wall of the airport there?
I don't know. He quote tweeted my picture that I had sent out and said he thought that was pretty cool. So maybe there's I don't know.
Opportunity.
Something tells me that the random European tourists would probably not be as excited about Adrian Martinez being there as some of us. But anyway, that was probably the most random thing that happened to me there was the Adrian Martinez spot.
Were there like 8 pictures of Victor Hovland and then one of Adrian Martinez? Is that
the weird thing? It was like generic pictures. Like there was like somebody else like messaged me because apparently slightly in the frame, it was a poor cropping job on my part. But above there was a high school football team in Tulsa, Oklahoma that was also on the wall. It was like somebody Googled like American football pictures, and like the first 2 things that came up that were moderately interesting were Adrian Martinez scoring a touchdown and this team from Tulsa or somewhere in Oklahoma also playing football. Because it was like there was like soccer and things like that also on the wall, but it was Adrian was very specific.
Okay.
It's disappointing to me that it wasn't the Caleb Lightbourne jumping photo that you'll see every so often with recruits when they announce their Nebraska offer and they go grab the generic Nebraska photo, and it's just Caleb Lightbourne getting hyped up, jumping with the pile.
Yeah,
you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, he like basically that one time has like a 16-foot vertical jump.
Yeah,
in the back of the team running out. It's we'll have to find. We should make that the tweet with this podcast is Caleb Lightbourne absolutely jumping out of the gym.
Yeah, I think we can.
Or Caleb handling a Rubik's Cube. Wasn't he really good with that?
That was his talent.
Yeah.
He stood up in front of everybody on the team and solved the Rubik's Cube in like a minute or something.
Yeah. That was it.
They say once you know how to solve it, you can do it really fast. Like it's It's just knowing how it all goes together, I suppose. I've never solved one though, so that's mostly just sour grapes for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to take down Caleb a peg there.
I would never.
That was an Adrian Martinez segment, not a Scott Frost segment, by the way, for anyone.
Yeah. Well, it's also a welcome Michael Bruntz back to the United States segment, so it kind of worked. It worked hand in hand with all of it. Bruntz, when you were over in Norway, what were the things that you were thinking about as it related to Nebraska football? That's what we want to discuss here today.
I'm trying to remember what we said we were going to discuss on this podcast. Well, I was for about 20 minutes was trying to consider the high water mark of the Scott Frost era, and then I quickly moved on. And then
hard to find. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you had some significant commitments while I was there. I was thinking about the power of a Trey Taylor commitment early on and what that means for Nebraska's 2027 recruiting class. I liked the addition of the big fella from Ireland or from Iceland, excuse me, and kind of what he's able to do as a stretch and maybe a guy that can contribute finally out of the high school ranks for Nebraska basketball. All of those things were kind of front of mind as I was walking around there.
You weren't just walking around thinking about who from the 2025 class hasn't arrived at Nebraska yet? That wasn't on your mind? You were like, I wonder what Shawn Hammerbeck is doing up in Winter, South Dakota.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was standing there looking at the ocean, thinking, I wonder what Cade Peterzak's doing right now. And so I guess that was also the case as well.
Yeah, jokes aside, when you kind of look through the 7 guys that haven't arrived yet, and then you think about who's already been on campus, that 2025 recruiting class could be a really big piece if Matt Rule gets this thing off the ground. Like, I think there's a lot to kind of like what they've done there. I think there's a lot to like what they have on both sides of the trenches with some of the offensive linemen in Hammerbeck, who I mentioned. You got Juju Marks. You have Brian Tapu. And then defensively, it's Malcolm Simpson, Cade Peterzak, Tyson Terry. So those are 6 of them. And then the one guy who's the 7th here in the group, and he might be the most interesting of them all because nobody knows what position he's going to play, is Jeremiah Jones. So and he could end up on the defensive line with as big as he is. I posted the photo of him and Nebraska's top offensive tackle target, Kelvin Obit, at the Wisconsin game. And Jeremiah Jones, a safety, a high school safety, looks every bit as big as one of the top tackles in the country in the 2026 class. Like, it's just sort of remarkable. Out of that group, we'll start with you, Bruntz. Out of that group of names that I just ran through, who are you maybe most intrigued by of those sort of 7 players? You know, is it Jones with the positional versatility, Malcolm Simpson because the guys on the past staff that aren't here anymore that he committed to really loved him, like really liked Malcolm Simpson? Is it Cade Peterzak because he never talks? Is it Shawn Hammerbeck because he never talks? Is it Tapu because of a connection into the Polynesian community over there in Utah? I mean, where are you kind of most interested in one of those guys that hasn't arrived here at this point?
Yeah, I think it was it John Butler this spring? Brian, you can correct me on this, but he made some like passing comment about, you know, the guys that are not here yet, like they still have to take like a very deep look at them, but like whether or not they can kind of work into that rotation along the defensive line. And I think for that reason, I'm really interested in how Simpson and Peterzak, and we know Tyson Terry had the ACL surgery, you know, later on after going through wrestling. But those 2 guys, I think, probably intrigue me the most because I even though they weren't on campus in the spring, there's a huge learning curve there. I wouldn't completely rule them out, potentially, at least getting a long look from this staff, because I don't think that you're really in a position right now with that defensive line to close doors. You know, like I think you have to kind of consider every option because you're as a group trying to replace what you lost there. And I mean, let's say those guys are each kind of 4-game potential contributors for you. I mean, if you can find a very specific use for both of those guys, like I think that's something you have to explore. And I think that's why those two more than any probably intrigue me the most. I mean, Jeremiah Jones, we can talk about, we should, just given his positional versatility, but those two in particular, I mean, if you can find a third down pass rush situation for Malcolm Simpson, I think you can probably do that if he kind of shows that kind of extra gear that like Willis McGahee had last year to get after the quarterback and make a few plays. So that's kind of where I go. It was Butler, wasn't it, Brian?
Yeah, he did say that. And Keona Davis arrived last summer, right?
Yep, that's what I was going to say. So Keona Davis has already shown that if you can physically withstand it and mentally get there, they're willing to play you. And so I don't know if Malcolm Simpson or Cade Peterzak can pull that off, but we certainly have a recent history example of just because you arrive in the summer doesn't mean that you're destined for a red shirt.
I remember Rule saying about Simpson, it was actually like his basketball footage, the first thing that jumped out to him, just like what a freak athlete he was. And I think people have seen, who are on social media and travel in those circles, have seen the clips of like, I mean, he can get up. Yeah, he can get up for a big man. And then Peterzak's interesting because I was looking at a quote Rule had. It was actually when he was on the podcast with Urban Meyer, and he said, "We take Montana, we take North Dakota, South Dakota really, really seriously, especially for big players. They're like every class. I think they're going to always be patrolling that, those Dakotas and Montana. Yeah. So you could expect like a guy from that region, I think most classes or every other class at least. And then I know he gets talked about a lot because he's local, and Tyson Terry, I mean, he had this is no offense to my family and friends, but I never had a champ show up to my graduation ceremony like he did with Bud Crawford. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, he's going to probably be a redshirt this year because he's still rehabbing from the ACL, but it sounds like that's tracking really well. And I was looking at, there's always sort of this topic in the offseason about Husker football and how it's doing in Omaha, like with recruiting and stuff. And if you put the last two classes together, it's an interesting crew. They're all defensive. Like I've never thought about it, but you got Caden Vermoss, Tyson Terry, Mooberry, Donovan Jones, Christian Jones, Caleb Benning. 6 really interesting guys on the defensive side, all of them from the Omaha area. That I'm not saying it's all going to happen this year, but I think like Donovan Jones and Caleb Benning could set a good trend as far as, at least being in the rotation in a deep secondary. And Tyson, I think, goes along with that crew from the Omaha area that you're like, I could see in 2 or 3 years, if they progress like you hope, that we're hearing from 4 or 5 of those 6 guys at least.
Just to add to that, Jace Reynolds committed last week. He's from Elkhorn, so that's be the next defensive player. And then Nebraska is going to be fighting Iowa tooth and nail for Darian Jones, Donovan Jones's brother, which could be another Omaha defender across the three class span. Yeah, Tyson, I think, is going to be really interesting when he's healthy. He's one of those guys that I wonder if, and Peterzak could be like this too, or even Shawn Hammerbeck, where they get working with a Corey Campbell and like they look like one thing right now, but then next spring when we get into the first real 20, 30-minute period to watch some of these guys, if we're not going to be talking about how they physically sort of reshaped themselves under Corey Campbell's tutelage. So that's definitely something to watch. Bruntz mentioned it. I mentioned it. Jeremiah Jones, the only non-sort of guaranteed lineman out of this group. Do we have any kind of feel? Do you recall when Nebraska's talked about him? Because for me, it's largely been, I think they're pretty open to multiple different positions for Jeremiah Jones. I know tight end has been discussed. Wide receiver, when Garrett McGuire was here, was discussed. Linebacker or hybrid player between a safety linebacker or even an edge has been discussed with someone who's 6'4". I imagine he's heavier than 200 pounds right now, but he was 6'4", 200 was his listed height and weight when he signed. And I mean, those are legitimate measurements too. And so he's got a long wingspan. It's just a sort of a really unique guy that I'm fascinated where he's going to call home position wise. Do you have any thoughts on that, Bruntz?
Yeah, I would kind of be interested in him at wide receiver. I mean, I think of all the positions that were kind of mentioned with him, I think that one to me was most interesting. I think we probably need to get a little bit more clarification on that because, like you said, I mean, basically every coach that was involved with recruiting him during the course of his time and having those discussions has moved on elsewhere. So, um, different coaches kind of having a different idea of what they like, what they don't. That's going to certainly affect things. But I mean, when you look at his production from high school, there's no question that he could thrive on either side of the ball. Big kid. You mentioned kind of that picture that we have where he kind of dwarfs an offensive lineman that is a top 247 type player. So I do think though I would be more intrigued by him on offense just because he's kind of a unique mix of speed and size, and I feel like right now, among kind of the guys that have been in Nebraska's program for a few years, I mean, there's just not really a player that's kind of like him right now. You know what I mean? Like it just size wise, if you line him up at wide receiver, I mean, the closest I could maybe think of is like a Janarian Bonner, but I think he's a little bit taller than Bonner too. So kind of an interesting.
And he's thicker than like a Carter Nelson or a Quinn Clark too.
Right. Yes. Clark was one I was thinking of who's a little bit taller, but I think he's a little bit, like you said, a little bit better built than what Clark is.
Yeah, Jeremiah Jones will be an interesting one for sure, and that was one Nebraska had to fight off on signing day. Matt Rule had to make the closing phone call, and he was able to do it to keep Missouri from plucking the player from Murray, Kentucky. Who else do you guys have thoughts on Juju Marks? I just want to add real quickly, he's one of those offensive linemen that is late coming to football. He was a basketball player mostly, and then got into football, was thinking his path was going to be the defensive line. And a coach basically was like, hey, why don't you try this? And then teams were way more interested in him as an offensive player. And so he sort of flipped his recruitment. Nebraska got involved when they brought in Jamar Mosey. I just think along with Hammerbeck and Tapu, that's an interesting threesome of potential development on your offensive line as they try to just build up what they have behind their current rosters.
Yeah. I think both him and Tapu are interesting development pieces. Obviously, there's some depth in front of them, but I like how they're stocking the cupboard there. And like Tapu, I know he's an example of a guy. I think he was coached by Finoti actually a little bit, and he really recognized, which I think Donovan Raiola has really succeeded at, is you always hear recruits say, oh, they're a family. And, you sometimes you might roll your eyes, say, well, that's what they would say. But I do think that comes across to most visitors. Like that's a group that's really well connected. I think you see like Houston Torres already got here and feels at home and has liked, how that looks. And so that word spreads to those guys. And then if they have a good first year in Lincoln with it, they spread it to other guys. And so I do think they're building a connection in some areas, with Polynesian recruits too, that maybe we've talked about. Can Nebraska get back into that? I think you're starting to see that possibility, and you're starting to see those branches grow a little bit.
Let's shift gears and talk a little bit of quarterback offseason ranking. 247 Sports has a top 50 list, and of the top quarterbacks returning for the 2025 year, Dylan Raiola, as expected, is on it. He comes in at number 18, which I don't know that I'm that surprised as to where he lands. It's more so that I think this is a year where college football doesn't have a de facto, this guy's definitely the best quarterback. You can look at an Arch Manning and think that. You can look at some of these other guys that are going to get opportunities, DJ Lagway, being one of them. He's in the top 10, but they haven't been through that grind. And one of the things, guys, that I think has happened is Dylan Raiola, we knew was going to be the starting quarterback for Nebraska. I don't think he gets enough credit for the fact that he played all 13 games. I don't think he gets enough credit for what it would have taken to play in the Big Ten and to go from this defense to that defense to this defense to that defense, and doing it all as an 18-year-old going through this all the first time. I just think when we talk about what it's going to look like for him in 2025, there's not enough credit for how he's gone through a lot of this mentally already that other quarterbacks haven't had to do yet. And, he did it as the focal point of an offense that was kind of up and down. And I'm just wondering if he's not going to be markedly better in 2025 just because he had all of that experience and kind of went through the first sort of road trip, the losing experience, that the rough games against Rutgers and Indiana back-to-back, going into Columbus and having Ohio State on the ropes. That's got to help him in 2025, right, BC?
Yeah, something I think I've picked up on, and, it's just here and there, but I think other quarterbacks who are about the same age are getting graded on a curve a little bit more than Raiola has been. And he's got to go prove it. He's got to go make this surge and build off of sort of the offseason talk. We've heard how connected him and Dana Holgorsen are, and how, Dana can start the play and Raiola just finishes it off. Like he knows stuff inside and out. But I think the big thing, I've heard you talk about it, Schaefer, like you see a defense like UCLA throw some junk at you, like right off the bat. And it's like, now in the second year, how does he respond to that? Is he able to dissect that rather quickly? And maybe there is a rough series or two, but by the second quarter, they're kind of humming and he's figured some things out. And then the defense has to adjust to him. And so I think that could be the next big step. But I go back to I know there's different expectations for Raiola than the others, but this spring, Dana Holgorsen was talking about TJ Lateef and Marcos Davila, and how it could take a year for them to figure out, the offense. And that makes sense to me. And again, Raiola has different expectations than those guys with the 5-star and all that sort of thing. But you do have to remind yourself, he actually came in with a 6 to 8 month window and did learn it. And yes, he took some bumps, and we expected those bumps. We talked about him last summer leading into August. There's going to be some potholes that he's going to hit. And then when they happen, we shouldn't be surprised that he hit them. And that happened in October. And I thought at the end, you found him getting in more of a rhythm. The ball was coming out a little bit quicker, it felt like, the last few games. And so I thought that was encouraging. We've talked about it before. If Nebraska is going to be elite, if they're going to just make that big jump, it's pressure, but pressure is a privilege, and it's on number 15. He's a big part of that. If he can take that step, I think it's possible. I think number 18 is fair, though, about where you'd rank him among college quarterbacks with more to prove.
Hey, Bruntz, I'm gonna just kind of a fumble through this question, but what I kind of want to ask you, what is something that you expect Dylan Raiola to be better at in his second season than what he was maybe as a freshman? Is there an area in his game? Is there a certain stat? Is there a certain thing that you expect? Like right now, today, May 13th, Dylan Raiola is going to be better than X because he's done it already.
I think just kind of having the confidence to make make the kind of throw that's going to win you a game. I feel like in some ways last year, especially as the season kind of wore along, it felt like he was fairly risk averse, which is fine for a freshman quarterback, I think. But you didn't see him frequently just kind of let a ball rip. The next step in my mind, at least for Dylan Raiola, is, last year he was kind of a part of the offense, obviously a focal point of the offense. But this year, it's his offense. He is the guy, and you're gonna need that player to go and win you a game or two. You're gonna need him to pick up a key third down, to to maybe throw a ball into a window that's a little bit tighter than it should be and complete the pass. Like those types of things, I think he's going to have a better feel of when to do that and when not to do that. And the other thing that I think he's going to probably be more willing to do, just because it's been emphasized so much, is to kind of just take off and run. I mean, that was something that as the season wore on, it felt like his willingness to run more opened some things up. It felt like teams had to account for that more. Certainly Matt Rule's comments about needing to drop a few pounds and be a little bit more mobile, I think that's going to play into it too. But I think those are two areas where I think he can kind of make the offense a little bit better. And like the ranking question is interesting to me because I'm always fascinated by the perception of what Dylan Raiola's freshman campaign actually was and what the numbers actually were and how those stacked up to other freshman quarterbacks. I mean, when you compare him to other freshman quarterbacks in college football last year, he was really good. Like there were not many freshman quarterbacks that had as good of a season as Dylan Raiola. Part of that was he was the guy the whole season for Nebraska, and there weren't many guys that you could say that about in college football in 2024. I think locally, I remember at the start of the season, people say, well, what's a good season for Dylan Raiola? And people are just throwing out numbers, touchdowns, interceptions, yards. I don't know how much of that was realistic. Like some of the numbers that I heard kind of versus where they came down for Dylan Raiola, I mean, they weren't even in the same ballpark. And I think he was a fine quarterback last year. And is 18 a little bit lower than I would have him? I think he's probably a top 15 quarterback in college football right now. Like, I think that's fair to me right now as we sit here on May 13th. But I think there's also quite a bit of room left to reach that ceiling for him. And I think that's those types of improvements and leadership and confidence and things like that you get from having played through last year. That's going to allow him to get closer to that ceiling that I think is still very, very high. Like I feel like there's so much for him that is still out there for potential.
BT, is there anything where you have like an expectation right now that he's going to be able to do something that he maybe wasn't doing last year?
I think Bruntz was hitting. First off, I like the idea when you're asked like, what's a good yardage total for him? I always feel like it's Austin Powers off the top of my head, like 1 million yards. Like it's always hard for me to come up with that figure. But one number I did write about like a week or so ago, and this is where the wide receivers come into play, is they do have to get more separation. That's not that Raiola, he missed some throws and all that, but also, like, they did not have that take the top off a defense threat that we thought they would, and for reasons, because Rule even stated it. Like, he had that quote
Murder.
Murder you. And they only actually ended up with 10 receptions that were 30 yards or more. Now that can seem like you're cherry picking that number, but 30 and beyond feels like a really like, okay, there's explosive and then there's that ultra explosive type play. And that's sort of it. And Nebraska was 124th in that. And so I think it's going to be a big deal. Like early on in the season, Bruntz mentioned being risk adverse, but if Raiola hits on some big shots, like I know he did in that first game at UTEP, then it kind of tailed off. And so if he can establish a connection with a couple receivers that have shown, hey, they can go over the top of the defense and it opens up the whole middle, I think that'd be a big deal. And that's something I want to see like from this offense going forward.
I'm glad you said what you did about the explosive plays, because one of the dumbfounding things for me last year is how hard Nebraska made everything look on offense. Like every drive felt like it had to be this plotting, scrap out your 10 yards to get the next first down, because you just never had these. You just didn't hit a guy on a slant route who could make somebody miss and then run for 25 more yards. You didn't have like these breakout plays. And so they had to go finish drives. And I do think it's fair to expect them to be more explosive in 2025 than they were in 2024. I want to finish up with a real quick game that I just created, because I'm curious how many names Bruntz would be able to hear and then tell me which school the quarterback plays for. these are all guys that are going to be ranked higher on the list than Dylan Raiola. One we already did off air. Bruntz knows who Lenora Sellers is now.
Yeah.
He did not before. And I don't necessarily think that you should always know who the South Carolina quarterback is, but are you ready for this?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Who does Sawyer Robertson play for?
That's not just like a Southern lawyer.
That is not necessarily a Southern lawyer. That is not a Mark Twain character. That is a real quarterback in the Big 12.
Give me a conference.
Big 12.
So it sounds like somebody that's in the southern part of the conference. I know it's not Oklahoma State. I know it's not Houston. Who's at Baylor? Is he at Baylor?
Ding, 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 ding.
Nice.
He gets it. Look at you working your way through it. All right, next one. We're going to give you, we'll do an easy one here. We'll give you number 17, Kevin Jennings. Sawyer Robertson was number 10, by the way. No, number 9.
Kevin Jennings? Is he a transfer?
Kevin Jennings. Not a transfer. He's on the
That sounds
same
like a
team
wide-
that he was on last
He's not a
year.
wide receiver.
Did he-
It feels like a wide receiver name.
Did he host Jeopardy?
No, that's Ken Jennings.
That's his brother.
Very, very different Jennings. Yes.
Common mistake.
This quarterback had a monster game in the conference championship.
Oh, that helps. Oh, I know. He's at SMU. I remember that one.
Very good. Number 17, Kevin Jennings. All right. Carson Beck. What school is Carson Beck at?
Well, he's at Miami now because I know he got his car stolen. And he's no longer dating one of the twins. That thing fizzled.
That's the word on the street.
And his return helped open Dylan Raiola to Nebraska. Is that's the word on the streets?
That is the word on the street. All right, here's one for you. Fernando Mendoza.
So he was at Cal. I know that much. I know where he is. He's at Indiana now.
He is at Indiana, and he's number 14 on this list.
I watched a lot of
Fernando Mendoza.
I watched a lot of Fernando Mendoza running for his life after 10 p.m. this past year. So
I only watched Fernando Mendoza when it looked like Cal was going to beat Miami. And then I went to bed, and then I woke up, and Miami had come back in that game. ACC Classic, that one.
Where is he on the list? Like, how far is he in front of Dylan Raiola on the list?
He is number 14. Dylan is number 18.
Okay.
Statistically, Fernando Mendoza has 20 games in his career, 19 starts, 30 touchdowns to 16 interceptions, 4,712 yards, and he's number 14 on this list.
If Dylan Raiola last year, if he would have gotten closer to 20 with touchdowns, how much higher do you think he is on that list? Because the yards average
in the top 5.
Because the yards are almost
genuinely think that
like 3,000. He was really close to 3,000 last year.
Yeah.
It's just the balance of touchdowns and interceptions always, I think, probably is where you kind of get the ick a little bit.
Well, yeah, that stretch basically of Rutgers to UCLA where he just wasn't having touchdown passes. So a 4-game stretch is pretty hard to overcome that if you're not going to throw multiple and all the rest of them.
I think the whole Mahomes Jr. thing factors into the psychology of it too, because whether people want to or not, it's in the back of their brain. Like, well, he's not Patrick Mahomes, like when he has a bad stretch in his freshman year. And so I think people were quick to dig in on that when there were some difficult weeks.
Because I mean, he's basically closely tied to DJ Lagway. Like those are the two guys that are from that class. It's fascinating to see the impressions of each because I think their numbers were fairly similar. Is that fair?
Go ahead, Schaefer.
I would just say it like this. Lagway played in 7 full games. He had 12 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, flirted right around 55%, I think, passing. Nearly 40% of his yards came against Tulane and Samford.
In the Gasparilla Bowl.
Yeah, he took advantage of some of the lesser opponents. He had an okay half against LSU. That's what I keep hearing from people as to why he's a top 10 quarterback for college football. He had a solid half against a bad defensive LSU team. He's number 7 on the list.
Okay.
DJ Lagway. All right, another name for you, Blake Horvath.
Blake Horvath.
Number 15. He's on a team that has college football playoff aspirations. I mean, they all do, but this team, the pundits have said this team has college football playoff aspirations.
He's not a power
It is
five.
a group
He's
of
not
5.
A power 4, is he?
It's a group of 5 school.
America's darling. They're America's off-season darling, I think.
Oh, I know. He was at Navy. He's the Navy.
He is a Navy. He is a Navy quarterback.
Our Navy.
Yes, our Navy. Julian Sand.
He's at Ohio State. Right. I think I can probably get ballpark. The Sellers one threw me off.
You did pretty well.
You did do pretty well.
Most people.
Diego Pavia.
Yeah, he's a Vandy.
John Mateer.
He was at Washington State and is now he's at Oklahoma. He's Oklahoma's guy.
Correct. Yeah, you did very well. You know Sam Levitt, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that starting with Sellers set an unfair bar for my ability to name quarterback. So I'm pretty proud of myself on the Baylor one.
Number 1 on the list, Cade Klubnik.
He's at Clemson. And I'm sure Drew Aller's on there as well somewhere.
He's at Penn State, yeah.
Okay.
You know where Arch Manning is?
He's everywhere. He's
New Orleans Saints. They're already penciling him in there.
Yes.
Derek Carr's retired. The door is open. The Saints are tanking, and they're going for Arch Manning.
Tanking for Arch.
So, all right. I think that's everything I got. Anything you guys want to add here to finish off today's show?
So can it work out? Am I right on this? Arch Manning could end up playing basically 1 year of college football, and then he would be eligible, right? Because this is year 3.
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
Would he make more? Do you think he'll make more as an NFL rookie or at Texas?
It's debatable. What's fascinating is he didn't play that much in high school either. Like his entire stock is based on the last name and like camp performances, and he's played well when he's had an opportunity for Texas. I think he's an incredibly talented individual. It's sort of fascinating because it's not like he's had a 4-year starting career in high school and then 3 he's been going into his 3rd season as a starter in college. It's been pretty condensed at this point to individual moments and games, and this is the first real runway that he's had in college football without Quinn Ewers there anymore. So we'll see what that looks like.
It's back to our main point about Dylan, though. I mean, Dylan went out there and you saw the scuff marks from his first season, and Arch Manning would have had the same things. It's just that's the thing there.
And it's also important to acknowledge Dylan Raiola playing for a Nebraska team that was imperfect in a lot of ways versus Arch Manning coming in as a backup quarterback for a Texas team that was number 2 or number 1 in the country for much of the year. So some of it's just a talent that surrounds you. And that's how you enhance that talent too. That's where Dylan's at. Can he make the players around him even better? That's kind of the big challenge for year 2. Absent of nothing else, I think we're good here today. We will be back next week with another Husker 24/7 podcast. We're going to have a Husker 24/7 Hoops cast. So this week as well as we discuss Nebraska's big addition, not from Ireland, Michael Bruntz.
Yeah, sorry.
But from Iceland. People get them confused. It happens.
I quickly corrected myself. It's up there.
Did you lay over in Reykjavik at all?
No.
Wow. Just went right past it.
I laid over in Atlanta and briefly Amsterdam. By the way, Amsterdam airport. I'm 6'1". when I stand up straight, and I was probably the shortest person in that airport. Like everybody over
Really?
there, there was just like a bunch of like Rick Smitzes everywhere.
Do they speed skate
Wow.
through the?
Yeah, there was speed skate. It was like a bunch of like 7-foot people just speed skating everywhere and hitting jumpers over Patrick Ewing.
Pacers Knicks series is coming, by the way, for the Eastern Conference
Yes.
Finals.
Yeah, get the Davis brothers out. It's time.
BC's just writing off the Celtics. Just they're done, huh?
Well, they had a big injury. I'm when you want some current NBA information, you come to me. And the Celtics, they're done.
The Wolves are up 3-1.
Big Wolves guy fell asleep in the third quarter, admittedly last night, but big Wolves guy.
Kevin McHale can't save the Celtics now.
All right, well, this is your NBA talk brought to you by Husker247, the only NBA talk that you can get, that comes from 3 very knowledgeable individuals that have combined watch many, many games this season.
Is Tom Gugliotta, is he having a good series?
You got Bruntz going. He could go another 10 minutes with this material.
He's going to drop a Wally Scheiterbach on us. What else you got in there? Name some more Timberwolves. Let's see how long you can go.
Well, Wally Zerbiak. Let's see. Was J.R. Ryder? He's not playing in the series.
Yeah. Sam Cassell's out for the he did that celebration and he groin injury.
Does Kelly
Terrell or Terrell Brandon? I don't think so.
Kelly Tripucka wasn't a Wolf.
Hoiberg's going to get a few minutes.
Yeah, he wasn't a Wolf. Sorry, I was thinking of the Hornets. I don't know. Marbury, Garnett, they're out for this one. They're not in this one.
Did you guys ever see the photo? The Star Tribune had it. It was with Hoiberg, and he's got Kobe and Kevin Garnett. They happen to be walking next to him. Man, I would blow up that photo and put it in all 10 of, put it in like at least 10 to 12 rooms in the house.
Like, oh, yeah, this one from a slightly different angle. Now this one is in black and white. Used a new Instagram filter to really bring the shine on that. No, that's fair. All right, I think we need to get out of here. If anyone's still listening, I apologize for the last 4 minutes of this podcast. We'll try to make it up for you on a future edition. For Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker 24/7. We'll catch you next time.